Okay, good morning and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube. We're learning Maasros, Maasros, Perek Gimel, Mishnayos, Tet, and Yud. And this will be the conclusion of the third parak of Maasros. How many prakim were there in Maasros? 5? Only 5 prakim. So only 2 more prakim to go. And then we move on to Maasros Sheni, the Masech you've all been waiting for. Alright, if you know what Maasros Sheni is, you've been waiting for it. If you don't know what Maasros Sheni is, we're going to learn about it. Let's start. Mishnah Ted over here. Gefen Shitin and Tua B'Chatzer. We talked about yesterday, if you have a tree growing in your Chatzer, right? The Chatzer is Kovea for Chumas Maasros. Say you have a vine growing in your Chatzer. No tell it's Kola Eshkol. You don't have to eat it one grape at a time. You can actually take the whole cluster of grapes and eat it together. You can take a whole pomegranate, a big watermelon, take the whole thing. Very powerful. It's not Kovea. Rabbi Kiva Omer Megager Be'Eshkolos. No, he says you have to take one grape at a time. Opori Barim, you have to take one seed out of the rim at a time. With Sofech Ba'atiach, to cut the watermelon to pieces and eat it piece by piece. Kusbar, she is Ruah B'Chatzer. Kusbar is another type of vegetable that's planted in the Chatzer. Mekartim Allah Ba'ochel. Primarily you eat the leaves of this vegetable. I have to check what kusbar exactly is. It's something to do with the man. I don't know. Coriander or something like that. I don't know if that's considered a fruit. It's a spice maybe, coriander. Therefore, the spice comes from the leaves, maybe a stem. That's why you eat it. If you had 2 or more leaves together, then it's considered koveya. Hasiya ve'ezov akornit shebachatzer. These are basically, I think, either food colorings or extracts that you use from these plants in order to put into your chatzer. Im hayun shmarim chayavim. If these things are valuable enough that you'd watch them, you'd protect them from other people stealing them, so then it's chayav and shumos and maasros. And if you start eating from them in a kavua way, more than one seed at a time or one plant at a time, then it would be kovel shumas and maasros. The reason it has to be watched, it has to be because it's only chayav and shumas and maasros if it's food and it's nishmar, it's valuable enough that you protect it. Yud te'ena shiomedes b'chatzer. Let's say you have a fig tree that's standing in your chatzer. V'nota lagina, right? Your chatzer is in your backyard, and it's not a straight tree. The tree is leaning into your garden. If you're in the actual front yard, right, which is not protected, it's not a chutzner, you could eat the entire fig tree. You can eat a lot of figs at one time. It's considered to be, even achilas kvas, considered, it's not kovel, it's shumas maasros. Omedes begin of nota lechutzner, ochal achas achas pater. If the principle, the trunk of the tree is in the yard, but you're eating from the branches which are already in the chutzner in your backyard, you have to eat it in a you have to eat it, it's only snack from it, you can't eat it in a kavua way. If you ate it 2 at a time, you'd be chayav because you go where you are, you go where you're eating. If you're eating in the gina, it's one thing. If you're eating in the chutzner, it's a different thing. Omedes ba'aretz, v'nota lechutzalaretz. Now the Gemara is going to talk about trees, if their trunk is in one place and the branches are another place, for other halachas, not just shumas and maasros. Omedes ba'aretz, v'nota lechutzalaretz. The tree is on the border of Eretz Yisrael, and its branches are in chutz la'aretz, or the trunk is in chutz la'aretz, v'nota la'aretz. The trunk is, I don't know, in Syria, and it's leading into Eretz Yisrael. Kol holich achar ikar. Principally, we go with the trunk, and therefore, if the trunk is in Eretz Yisrael, it's chayav and shumas maasros midaraisa. Nowadays, midarabbanan. If the trunk is in chutz la'aretz, even though it's leaning, so it wouldn't be chayav and shumas maasros. Ubate arichoma kol holich achar ikar. When it comes to arichoma is a din that houses or property that you buy in a walled city, if you sell it to someone, you have 1 year to redeem it, exactly 1 year. If you don't redeem it, it belongs to the buyer forever. You can never redeem it. As opposed to houses or property in unwalled cities in Israel, if they're not walled, so then you can't really redeem it for 2 years, but after that you could redeem it, and it also goes back in Yovel to you. So hakol hoich achar ikar, if you have a tree in a walled city and part of the tree, the branches on the outside, so then you go after the trunk, it's considered part of the walled city. If it's the opposite, where the trunk is outside and the branches are inside, it's considered outside. You have more than 1 year to redeem it. Ari miklat, hakol hoich achar. No, when it comes to Ari miklat, which is talking about people who kill b'shogeg unintentionally, they run away to your miklat, where you're safe, you can't be killed by the goal adam, by the avenger. This means not just, usually we go after the ikr, that's midaraisi, you go after the trunk. What the Mishnah means over here, the Gemara explains in Maasros, is that you also go after the nof when it comes to your miklat, even if the person who killed b'shogeg is on the branches, and the branches are outside the city, the trunk is inside the city, you go after the nof. I'm sorry. This is if the trunk is outside the Aram Miklat and the branches are inside the Aram Miklat, so then you consider it to be also inside the Aram Miklat. Of course, if the trunk is on inside the Aram Miklat and the branch on the outside, in either case you can't kill the Goel Adam, because principally you go after the Iker, the trunk. But there's an extra chumrah over here when it comes to killing the avenger, killing the Goel Adam, the person who killed B'Shogeg unintentionally. We go to chumrah. Probably we'll explain more in Iyon Ben Sion, Shafto Ida, Vetzilo Ida, when it comes to saving someone's lives. We go Lakula, Akol, Yerushalayim, Akol, Echachachar. No, when it comes to Yerushalayim, this is talking about Maasros Sheni. Maasros Sheni we mentioned at the beginning of this year. Maasros Sheni can only be eaten in Yerushalayim, and if you want to eat it outside, if you want to eat it in Yerushalayim, you can't redeem it. If you want to eat it outside Yerushalayim, you have to redeem it. So, if you're walking, you're taking your Maasros Sheni to Yerushalayim to eat, and you have a tree that's outside Yerushalayim, and the trunk is outside Yerushalayim, and the branches are inside Yerushalayim, or the opposite, right? So, of course, you go after the Iker, right? So, if the trunk is in Yerushalayim, that's already considered, the fruits on that tree are considered in Yerushalayim, and you can't redeem it anymore. But additionally, in Chomer, we also go after the nof, we also go after the trunk, that even if the trunk is outside Yerushalayim and the branches are inside, you want to eat from the branches that are inside, we're still machmir. We don't go after the ikr in that case, and it's still considered part of Yerushalayim, and you can't redeem it anymore. So we go to Chomer in those two cases. I'll explain why we go to Chomer in those two cases. Why in the case of Truma and Batei Arichoma we go after the ikr, and in the first part of the Mishnah we go where you are. We split the nof and the ikr. To explain this last Mishnah, you're going to need Ian Mitzion coming up next.